This episode is brought to you by SendSquared, the HubSpot of hospitality. Go to sendsquared.com today to learn more. All right, Slick Talkers, you've probably clicked on this episode specifically because of the title, where I am saying that your Superhost badge means absolutely nothing. Well, I'm here to share why I'm doing this episode because I recently, in the last few weeks, posted on LinkedIn and Instagram that your Superhost badge is absolutely meaningless these days. And as I received a very strong response from both sides of the aisles, from professional, big branded vacation rental management companies to individual hosts who have 1 to 5, maybe 20 properties. And the responses were pretty intense. I'm not going to lie. It gave me tons of content to read through, and it took me a ton of time to actually sit down and kind of organize my thoughts. And the reason why I did this hot take to help break it down for you is that I believe as hospitality professionals, we should not be letting the OTAs set our standards. We need to set the standards way higher than what they can. They're not the operators telling your cleaners how to clean, doing the inspections, taking out the trash, repairing any maintenance issues, communicating with the guests, taking their special occasion and making memories and moments through hospitality experiences that you can activate on site. They're not doing that. They're not. So why would you let them tell you what the standard is in order for you to perform better on their platform? So let's break it down in this episode. I'm going to share why the Superhost status varies based on your portfolio size. Benjamin Gross with Minty Living actually made a great comment on this. Why safety concerns expose flaws in the system from Justin Ford, of course, and how Superhost status can evolve into something way more meaningful as it has lost its touch from our friend Jimmy Repp. So without further ado, let's begin this special episode on Slick Talk right now. You're listening to Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast, a podcast for those who are in and around the hospitality industry who love, live, and breathe what they do. You can join us for candid and unscripted conversations with hospitality experts and founders as we go deeper into their personal stories while they're sharing their triumphs and trials that got them to where they are today. I'm your host, Wil Slickers, and you're listening to an episode of Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast. Now, let's begin. All right. So in order to do this episode justice, we have to kind of go over the evolution of Superhosts and maybe kind of address why it could be a flawed system. So let's break down the criteria. The criteria involves a high response rate, less than 1% of cancellation ratings, and it's easier for smaller hosts to achieve this because when you only have one property or 2 properties or 5, you can respond faster. You can create the automations in the app. You can be very kind of self-efficient inside of Airbnb. Now, as you scale, and I agree to this point, as Ben made a comment on the post, 80% of vacation rental managers or VRMs manage fewer than 40 units. So Superhost is manageable. But at 200 plus, keeping that status is a logistical nightmare and just unrealistic. So Airbnb's bias towards smaller operators is a very strong sign that maybe this system could be a little bit flawed. Larger managers work around Superhost metrics, with sub accounts and prioritizing direct bookings, of course, going beyond the Airbnb platform. So if someone touts their Superhost status, ask them how big their portfolio is, because a Superhost of 150 units is a very different game than a Superhost with 5 units or 5 homes. I know some people don't like the word units, but we're going to say it for the sake of clarification. Now, the dark side of Superhosting is no safety standards. So Justin Ford actually made a really good comment around Superhost is like getting a driver's license without taking a driver's test. There's no real safety requirement. So this has been a big issue in the vacation rental industry, as obviously Airbnb has taken off and has significantly changed the game for everybody involved, from individuals who just want to make some side cash to the big professional property managers with brands and standards and commitment to hospitality. And so the real risk, lawyers have used the superhost status against property owners in legal cases. You're a superhost, but you didn't install pool alarms or have a safety net or gate, etc. And Airbnb doesn't enforce safety standards. So even the top rated listings can be unsafe. And fortunately, we are in hospitality, and taking care of our guests is a significant part of our role. People are entrusting you for a safe place that's clean and reliable and well communicated about. So what should change? Airbnb should require some safety clarifications for superhosts. And I don't think that's a false or bold statement to say. I think we all want to feel safe in vacation rentals, whether it's an apartment or a condo to a single family home. We all want to feel safe. Hotels have such high standards for safety in the sense of the fire alarms, smoke alarms, exit routes, all the stuff, right? Lifeguard or pool signage, et cetera, all the stuff that homeowners or individuals that don't really think about this stuff get away with. And it's just not okay. So the key takeaway is that Superhost isn't a quality or safety guarantee, and it's more of a huge gap that Airbnb's missing in their credibility. So I think, Justin made great points, and I'm all in on this. And, going back to the first point with, how many properties are you managing? Does Superhost really mean anything? Again, 20 units, 20 homes, etc. It doesn't mean anything. I think your bar is too low. 200 homes, sure. Like that's a lot of guests and foot traffic going through your property. So I guess I could see it having some kind of meaning in that point. But again, when you choose to scale a property management company or a hospitality brand, hotel, restaurant, vacation rental, etc., those standards should rise with you as you intend to scale. If you are planning on scaling, let your standards scale with you. Big takeaway, something that we actually talk about on Good Morning Hospitality quite often, especially when it comes to Airbnb. Brandy Canali mentions this many times on top of what Ben mentioned in this LinkedIn post. So again, unit count does matter, but at the end of the day, if you're going to scale, let your standards scale with you. And then, is it really a baseline? Jeremy Worden's take is maintaining Superhost at scale is hard and should be celebrated. Jimmy Repp, his perspective, and he actually is a former employee of Airbnb, said, Superhost should be a baseline after 1 year. Keeping it for 37 quarters for himself is something that he is proud of. But the reality check is some hosts or people that list on Airbnb, some hosts see Superhost as a big win. Others see it as just another way of marketing tool by Airbnb. This episode is brought to you by Fido. If you've heard last week's podcast with Justin, you'll know that Fido is going all in on their bin to curb service on top of inspections of your properties in order to make sure you don't miss anything for your excellence in hospitality beyond Superhost status. So shout out to Fido. Go to the link in the show notes, getfido.com. Let them know that Wil sent you from Slick Talk to learn more. Let them know that Wil Slickers sent you from Slick Talk. And now we're back to the episode. So to address those comments, I think it should be celebrated, but I like Jimmy's perspective a little bit better in the terms of you are a first-time host, you never worked in hospitality, then I guess you get some leeway to have a learning curve, right? Like especially myself, when I was a front desk agent for the first time at a 717 unit hotel in the Autograph Collection of Marriott, of course, I had a ton of mistakes, tons of issues, learning the technology, learning the building, learning the processes, learning the brand standards, etc. So obviously I had a pretty significant learning curve, but at the end of the day, you only get that learning curve excuse for a short period of time. And I love what Jimmy said, where he should, give a little bit of leeway, be proud of your Superhost status in the first year, but after that, continue to raise the bar for yourself. And a better way to maybe phrase this key takeaway is that for new hosts, it's a stepping stone. And for experienced hosts or operators, it's just another checkbox that you need to maintain. It's just part of the job. You have no excuse but to make it. If you're trying to up level or upskill your hospitality game and go beyond Superhost status, then you need something to help streamline your property management. And that would be through our friends at Hostfully. If you have 1, 5, 10, 15, 100 150 properties, then you need to get with Hostfully and get your operations streamlined. Put all of your properties on one platform, connect to the best channels like Airbnb, like Booking.com, like Marriott Homes and Villas through their direct integrations at Hostfully. And of course, connect the rest of your tech stack together in their amazing marketplace. So if you use a dynamic pricing software, lock access control, AI messaging tools, they're all going to be in the Hostfully marketplace, and you can't miss out on streamlining your operations in order to ensure that you keep achieving excellence and setting your own standard. So grab the link in the show notes, which is hostfully.com. Let them know that Wil sent you, or grab the email in the show notes, which is going to be from Frank. Frank was on the podcast when we had the Hostfully industry report with Frank and Fred, and it was such a great episode. But Frank is committed to helping all Slick Talkers ensure that they are successful on the Hostfully platform. So grab that link, grab that email, and of course, thank you so much for listening to Slick Talk. So what is Airbnb going to do next, or what should they do next in response to the lackluster around Superhost status? Which, again, if you listen to the earlier part of the episode, understand there's a certain kind of like spectrum of this. But Jimmy had a really good idea and how he thinks that Airbnb should evolve the Superhost status into a better system. And so a more evolved scale. And I know they've come up with, guest favorites and other things to kind of showcase properties, but that's an individual property level, which I also like. I think property level is specific, but host wise, when it comes to the hospitality piece, it's really important. And I think Superhost has lost its feeling, in my opinion. It should be a standard no matter what, but it's kind of like, Spotify Wrapped style situation, and maybe creating a Michelin star type rating, because Jimmy points out in the comments, so I'll share here, but it's a real prestige rating when you go to a restaurant and you're at a Michelin rated restaurant, or now the Michelin rated hotels, aka the Michelin Keys rated hotels. This is a big, big achievement. And that is something that I think Michelin has done well, where they make that standard rise so much higher to the top. So the 1% of Superhosts that actually do great hospitality and great service beyond just the property and managing a good listing that gets bookings, it showcases milestones. Peloton does a really cool thing, like streaks and incentives for long-term excellence. So how long have you had that Superhost or that 1% kind of badge throughout your career on the platform? And kind of like why this matters is that Airbnb has the ability and the data and the design power to really make this stand out and more meaningful. As Jimmy states in the comments, because he's worked at Airbnb, he knows how the inside works. And we know how strong of a brand this platform is to the overall traveler, right? I know Natalie Palmer from No Vacancy podcast on our network talked with Katie Klein on Sweet Success about how Airbnb has 80 million eyeballs on it per month. To get 80 million eyeballs on your property, or potentially 80 million eyeballs on your property, is a significant lift for you and your business. But again, key takeaways is that Superhost is more of a checkbox, and it should be a badge of true hospitality excellence. And we just haven't seen that. It's like Justin said, it's like getting your driver's license without taking a driver's test. So I'm kind of conflicted on this. So to wrap up here, and in conclusion, if you're still celebrating the Superhost status, I think it's really time to ask you what your real differentiator is beyond the badge. You could lose that at any moment for any reason that Airbnb pretty much wants outside of their criteria. So again, if Airbnb removes Superhost tomorrow, would your guests still choose you? That's the question. How do you stand out? How do you make that platform actually work for you without their guidelines on how to tell you how to host? Again, I'm a significant believer, and I made this comment on that LinkedIn post, that when I was in the Army National Guard and I went through Army basic training and Army advanced individual training, or advanced school training, AIT, we had a platoon sergeant who would say, "We set the standard," and he beat this into our head. And I think this is one of the biggest takeaways I had through my military experience, is that the Army gives you a certain standard. The military gives you a certain standard on how many push-ups to do in 2 minutes based on your age and weight and height, how many sit-ups to do in 2 minutes, how fast to run a 2-mile run. There's a standard that's given to you in order to pass the Army's kind of qualifications. those are great standards. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure many people can look at those standards and actually overachieve in that, which is great. But you should be setting the standard. You shouldn't let somebody else, especially when it comes to your business and hospitality, tell you how to achieve that. Like, as you scale, I think you need to raise those standards with you. A big call to action I want to say is share your thoughts on here. Because I think as you continue to raise your own standard, you're going to see where there's a lot more flaws in platform badges like the Superhost badge that, again, just don't match up for your business goals and for your standard of hospitality. So I would love for you to show how Superhost should maybe be redefined, how Airbnb should introduce safety requirements into these standards, and let's keep moving the conversation forward. I want to hear what your thoughts are. So tag me on LinkedIn, tag me on Instagram, and let's continue the conversation. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you to our show partners for making Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast, possible. We hope you enjoyed the show, and we would love to connect with you outside of the podcast. So you can follow us on all of our social media channels for daily hospitality content, or find us on slicktalkthepodcast.com. And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. I'm your host, Wil Slickers, and we will see you guys all again next week.